In stark contrast, the scenes of civil unrest and protest in Charlotte is the official opening of the African American History and Culture Museum on the National Mall. It is the latest Smithsonian museum here in Washington. President Obama officially dedicating it about an hour or so ago. Let's bring in Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and author of Eyes on the Prize, America's Civil Rights Years. Juan, nice to see you. Wish we were in our office together kicking this around, but we'll do it over the magic of television.
Thank you, Leland.
The juxtaposition, though, of the images out of Charlotte from Wednesday night and the looting and the rioting to today, the African American Museum being opened on the National Mall, and President Obama seemingly half to acknowledging these events of the past week or so, it was striking.
Without a doubt, I think President Bush, who signed the legislation back in '03 that authorized the creation of this African American History and Culture Museum, he spoke to it when he said, you know, America is a great country. We don't hide from the facts. We don't hide from the truth. And in fact, the truth often inspires us. President Obama picked up on that same theme, Leland, when he spoke about we as Americans we are Americans, all of us, including black Americans, not a burden on the society, not a strain on the society, but in fact, we have sort of created the energy that allows America to fulfill its constitutional ideals of we the people, all equal in the eyes of the government, and push that always in terms of the change to the status quo. So when we think about Tulsa, when we think about Charlotte, about the kind of churning that we see at the moment, I think both presidents spoke to the idea that that's part of the American contradiction and complexity, but in a way it's part of our blessing, who we are.
Well, they certainly spoke to that point. Do you think President Obama, though, has spoken enough, perhaps in the past couple of days and then also today, about sort of the underbelly of these quote-unquote protests, how they have become riots, how they've devolved into violence? It seems as though that sort of real condemnation at times is missing from the president, who wants to focus, to your point, on sort of the parts of American history coming together, how protest has got us to where we are, rather than the violent underbelly.
Well, I think he spoke to it pretty clearly in an ABC interview yesterday that I saw, in which he said, you know, riots really don't help anybody. The key here is to build an American coalition, to create allies. And he said, and I think this is so true, that riots act to alienate people, polarize people who are afraid of the rioting or who see the violence and think, my gosh, who would do such a thing? And I think that's right on point, that if you really want people to hear you, you can't engage in destruction and violence. That makes no sense.
From being on the streets of Charlotte, I can tell you it certainly was polarizing to hear some of the things that people were saying, and the level of violence and vitriol and those kinds of things.
Yes.
To that sense, and I know as someone who has studied the civil rights movement, is probably one of the foremost experts in the world on it, give us a sense of the difference between the civil rights movement and the promise of a better tomorrow and what was being fought for in the civil rights movement and how it was being fought for. Why are those values and ideals not now carried through to the African American leaders of today in the protests we see in Charlotte, the protests in Ferguson, all those kinds of things? We didn't see these kinds of behavior. We didn't hear this kind of hatred towards whites and those kinds of things during the civil rights movement. Why now?
Well, I think you did hear some of it. Remember, you had a Black Power movement, you had Black Panthers and the like, but it was clearly secondary. What was prominent foremost was Dr. King and an appeal to conscience, almost on the basis of a religious theme, Leland, a theme that said, you know, we're all Christians, and how can you not see me as your brother if we're both children of Christ? And I think that really helped to persuade America. When Dr. King spoke of having a dream of all of us together, looking beyond color to character, if you'll recall so eloquently Dr. King speaking from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I think that really touched the American heart. Now we're in a different era. I think we've gone from, you know, all people being equal rights, to we now do more measurements, affirmative action, arguments over disparities in everything from income to suspension rates to police violence. So as a result, I think you have more difficult issues to deal with and more opportunities for people to see us as engaged in identity politics, as opposed to appealing to the common ideal of the Constitution, actually of our very, independence, that we are all equal and all have constitutional rights as individuals without regard to color.
Well, and rights given us to us by God, not by our government.
Yes.
You have to wonder what Dr. King would think about looking down right now and seeing what has happened to his movement that he loved so much for and sacrificed so much for as well. Juan, appreciate your time as always. We'll see you in D.C. soon.
I really appreciate it, Lee, and thanks for giving me the time.
All right, take care, buddy.